Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning into this video. Today is June 7th, 2016. The Assyrian, is he the Antichrist or is he Gog of Magog? I believe that there is a misconception and maybe even a deception on this. Most of the Christian world automatically assumes that the Assyrian is the Antichrist. However, I believe that he is Gog of Magog. So I'll let you decide, and I'm going to help you figure that out. First thing I'm going to do is just do a quick comparison between the two, Gog of Magog and the Antichrist. And then we'll do a comparison with the Assyrian. Okay, so Gog of Magog, we know that he'll come against Israel, of course. We get all of our information from Ezekiel 38 and 39 concerning Gog of Magog. The Antichrist, he'll also come against Israel. The timing of the Gog-Magog war is debated. We know it's in the latter days because it tells us that. Usually that means within the last 7 years, the 7-year tribulation. But it could happen just prior to the 7-year tribulation. Either way, I believe it's the war that brings the Antichrist to power. But we know that the Antichrist will come against Israel at the midpoint. He will proclaim himself God at the abomination of desolation. And at that point, he will go and try and destroy the Jews and the Christians. His intentions in Gog-Magog are to take a spoil and to take a prey. Okay, and the Antichrist, his intentions are to persecute and kill God's chosen people. He'll be possessed by Satan, and he is the ultimate form of evil. He could care less about taking a spoil or taking a prey. This is about a war against God, against God's people, and trying to destroy them. Gog of Magog, his death, he will die in the mountains of Israel. And the Antichrist is captured alive at the valley of Armageddon and thrown into the lake of fire. So he lasts all the way to the end of the tribulation period, the 7 years. Gog, he will come against a land of unwalled villages. And the Antichrist, he'll speak against the God of gods, claim to be God, and will be worshipped as God. He will virtually rule and destroy the entire world. And then lastly, over here, Gog, it says that he was spoken of in old time by God's servants, the prophets of Israel. Okay, so now I'm going to just jump ahead really quick, and we're going to look at the Assyrian and some of the verses talking about him. So we're going to jump to Isaiah 10. And what will you do in the day of visitation, and in the desolation which shall come from afar? To whom will you flee for help? And where will you leave your glory? Without me they shall bow down under the prisoners, and they shall fall under the slain. For all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is my indignation. I will send him against a hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge, to take a spoil and to take a prey. Where have you heard that before? If you're a prophecy buff, you know for a fact that that is Ezekiel 38 and 39, and it's using the exact same words. If you read in the King James Version, it's the exact same words. If you're not reading in the King James Version, you may have missed this, but it's exactly the same words. He is there to take a spoil. This is the Assyrian. He is there to take a spoil and to take a prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Excuse me. Now this next verse, verse 7, is actually very telling. Howbeit he meaneth not so, neither does his heart think so, but it is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. So this guy doesn't think he's evil. This guy here says, in his heart, that he doesn't think that he's there to destroy, but he is. So he doesn't believe he's evil. But he does cut off a few nations. And going down to verse 9, is not Samaria as Damascus? So I want you guys to think about this in real time. Right now, who is in Assyria? Who's in Syria? It's Gog of Magog. It's Russia. And who is the king of Syria right now? Assad is the king in name, but if Putin tells Assad to jump, Assad's going to jump. And who knows what's going to happen by the time this is over? Assad will probably be gone. Moving forward still in Isaiah 10, wherefore it shall come to pass that when the Lord hath performed his whole work upon the Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, I will punish the fruit of the stout heart of the king of Assyria, in the glory of his high look. So he'll be punished, he'll be defeated, just like we see in GOG Magog, Ezekiel 38. We jump down to 14. And my hand hath found as a nest the riches of the people. So again, we see here that he's there for the riches of the people. He's there to take a spoil. The Antichrist is not interested in that. He just wants to destroy. And then jumping forward, there was none that moved the wing or opened the mouth or peeped. Doesn't that sound like Ezekiel 38? When it says that all the young lions just sit back and do nothing, and they just kind of say, well, what are you doing? Are you here to take a spoil or take a prey? What are you doing? Seems like nobody does anything. So moving forward, therefore shall the Lord of hosts, send among his fat ones leanness. So he's going to be punished. And then after that, the remnant shall return, the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty God. And then going down to verse 24, therefore thus saith the Lord God of hosts, O my people that dwellest in Zion, be not afraid of the Assyrian. He shall smite thee with a rod, and shall lift up his staff against thee, after the manner of Egypt. I want you to remember that, after the manner of Egypt, Isaiah 10, okay? Because what's going to happen is Russia is going to go through Israel and destroy Egypt, and then come back and go after Israel, okay? But I'm going to show that to you in a minute. So what we have here, we have the three, and all three of them we know will come against Israel, okay? The timing as far as the Assyrian, all we know is it's going to be in the end time, so we don't really know when. But we know that his intentions are to take a spoil and to take a prey, which is exactly the same as Gog Magog. Okay, and then again we look over here at the Antichrist, and his intentions are to kill God's people. That's very, very plain and simple. So moving forward, Isaiah 14, the mercy on Jacob. Now this is a passage that has been misinterpreted. If you read the very first verses, the very first verse says, Lord God will have mercy on Jacob, mercy on Israel. And this is a passage of him cleansing the land of Israel. And it's broken up into 5 parts. Part 1 is the fall of the king of Babylon, who is the Antichrist, by the way, if you guys haven't figured that out. He is the king of Mystery Babylon, spoken in a Revelation. And he's the Antichrist. And then, of course, next we have the fall of Lucifer. And we know that, of course, the Antichrist will be possessed by Lucifer. Then we have Babylon destroyed. And again, of course, we see that in Revelation 17, 18, 19. And we see that in Isaiah 13 and 14. And we see that in Jeremiah 50 and 51. So Babylon is destroyed. So the Antichrist is destroyed. The fall of Lucifer, Babylon is destroyed. Then the fall of the Assyrian. And then lastly, Palestine destroyed. So he's going to cleanse the land of Israel from these people. Okay, and so a lot of people, when they read this, they try to lump the Assyrian in with the king of Babylon and Lucifer and say they're the same. But what we're finding, or what we know, is that Palestine will be destroyed, probably by Gog of Magog or the Assyrian. And then, of course, after that, the Antichrist comes in and tries to complete the job that Gog started, basically. So jumping into Isaiah 14 again, I will break the Assyrian in my land and on my mountains, tread him underfoot, then his yoke shall be removed from them, and his burden removed from their shoulders. So he dies in Isaiah 14 on the mountains of Israel. So death, he dies on the mountains of Israel. And of course we know that Gog of Magog also dies on the mountains of Israel. But the Antichrist, he is captured alive at the Valley of Armageddon. At the very end, he makes it through the entire 7-year tribulation. He's thrown into the lake of fire. So it cannot be the Antichrist. This has to be Gog of Magog or somebody else. So now we go to Micah 7, verses 11 through 13. Okay, in the day that thy walls are to be built, in that day shall the decree be far removed. So it sounds to me like there's going to be some kind of decree to build walls, and I'm wondering if this will be part of the security package that will be built into a two-state solution that's being worked on right now. That they'll build a wall between the new boundaries or whatever. But here it says that basically that wall will not be built. So in the day that the walls are to be built, in that day shall the decree be far removed. In that day also he shall come even to thee from Assyria. So we know he's going to come from Syria. Think about who's in Syria right now. And from the fortified cities, and from the fortress, even to the river. The river is the river Nile in Egypt. And we know that he's going to come from Egypt, and he's going to come from Syria. And from sea to sea, there's seas on both sides of them, and from mountain to mountain. Notwithstanding, the land shall be made desolate because of them that dwell therein, for the fruits of their doing. We actually already see some of this happening. They're making the land of Syria desolate right now. So moving forward here, he will come before the walls are built, and then over here in Gog we see he will come against a land of unwalled villages. So he's coming before the walls are built, and they'll be unwalled because they haven't been built yet. So I see a correlation there, that the walls are mentioned for both the Assyrian and the Gog, but they're not mentioned anywhere with the Antichrist. Okay. Now going over to the Antichrist, he will speak against the God of gods, claim to be God, and will be worshipped as God. He will virtually rule and destroy the entire world. And nowhere do we see that kind of attributes attributed to the Assyrian. We do see him get puffed up, and that he's proud of what he's done. He thinks he's done it all himself, and then God says, no, you didn't do it all yourself. You can't, the axe can't swing without a holder. So, but we don't see him, being worshipped as God, saying that he is God or anything like that. Okay. And then lastly, over here in Gog of Magog, he was spoken of in old time by God's servants, the prophets of Israel. So this is very interesting. Ezekiel 38, verse 17. Thus saith the Lord God, art thou he of whom I have spoken in old time by my servants the prophets of Israel, which prophesied in those days many years that I would bring thee against them? Aren't you him? Aren't you the one that I talked about? And if you look at this here, it's prophets, plural. So my challenge to you is to find anywhere in the Old Testament, anywhere, that talks about this guy named Gog who will come against Israel, or anyone at all other than the Antichrist and the Assyrian that comes against Israel in the end times. You won't find it. I guarantee you won't find it. I know for a fact that you won't find it because it doesn't exist. There are two. It's the Assyrian. Or I should say there's three. There's Assyrian, there's Gog of Magog, and there's the Antichrist. And so because of that, we know that this has to be, the Assyrian has to be Gog of Magog. It must be Gog of Magog. So you look at the correlations here. They all lean towards Gog of Magog, and I actually believe that Gog of Magog is being spoken of as much, maybe even more, than the Antichrist when it comes to the prophecies of the Old Testament and the New, simply because I believe that we as a church will see Gog Magog, but for the most part we're not going to see the Antichrist because of the rapture. So it's really more important to the church. The events that happen with Gog Magog are more important to the church, and I think that is a huge, humongous, the sign that we are supposed to be looking for when Jesus says there'll be wars and rumors of wars and nation will rise up against nation. I believe this is the war he's talking about. So Gog the Assyrian. Could it be that Gog enters into the land of Israel in peace? So now that we have figured out, or hopefully figured out, that the Assyrian is actually Gog of Magog, that opens up a whole new realm. And what we're going to find is that now everything is going to start making perfect sense. Okay, so check this out. Hosea 12:12. Ephraim, who is Israel, feedeth on wind and followeth after the east wind. Who's to the east? The Assyrian is to the east. Syria is to the east. And they feedeth on wind, which basically means that they're not relying on God anymore. They're feeding on the wind. He daily increaseth lies and desolation, and they do make a covenant with the Assyrian, or with the Assyrians. So they're going to make a covenant with the Russians, and oil is carried into Egypt. This is very interesting because what I'm going to show you is that Russia is going to come in, or Gog of Magog is going to come into Israel. It really looks like he's going to come in peaceably. You're going to create some kind of agreement here, and they're going to carry oil down to Egypt, and something's going to happen, and they're going to go against Egypt, and they're going to basically destroy Egypt, and then they're going to turn around and come back north and come after Israel. So, but we'll see. Like this is, but this sure was how it looks. So moving forward from here, going back to Ezekiel 38 again. Thus saith the Lord God, it shall also come to pass that at the same time that things will come. So he'll come into the land. The verse prior, he comes into the land. Okay, comes into Israel. And at the same time, things come into his mind, and he shall think an evil thought, and thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest and dwell safely, and them dwelling without walls, without walls, and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods, that dwell in the midst of the land. So here we see he's going up. It sounds to me like he's going to be in Egypt, and he's going to go up against a land of unwalled villages to take spoil and take a prey. So Isaiah 10, therefore, thus saith the Lord God of hosts, O my people that dwelleth in Zion, be not afraid of the Assyrian. He shall smite thee with a rod, and shall lift up his staff against thee after the manner of Egypt. After the manner of Egypt. So he's going to smite Egypt, and then he's going to come up and smite Israel. And then in verse 20, Isaiah 10, it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel, and such as have escaped of the house of Jacob, will never again depend on him who defeated them, but will depend on the Lord and the Holy One of Israel in truth. So what I see here, and I look at this in real time, I actually believe these events are all taking place right now, is that they have gotten such a cold shoulder from the Obama administration that they're looking for help from somebody else, and he's going to basically be pushed into the arms of Putin, and they're going to create some kind of, maybe Putin helps him figure this whole thing out and comes up with his own two-state solution, and in that solution they create some kind of oil deal, because we all know this is about the oil. If you guys pay attention to end time prophecy, we know that this is all about the oil that they found in Israel. So it looks again like they depend on him, and then he enters the land peaceably, and then he betrays them and comes against them. In Zechariah 9, I will camp around my house because of the army, because of him who passes by and him who returns. No more shall an oppressor pass through them, for now I have seen with my eyes. So there we see it again, Zechariah 9. He passes by, so he goes down to Egypt, and then he returns. So you see how all this actually is fitting together perfectly, right? I mean, it just links together perfectly. And I hope you guys all take this video and write these stuff down and go and study it yourself. Now here's where things get really, really, really interesting, okay? Because Daniel, once you figure out Daniel and who is being spoken of in Daniel, it opens up a plethora of information. And this is one of those things where I tend to think, there's a misconception or a deception in the church, and I'm leaning right now towards deception, and you'll see why here in a little bit. Okay, so the main thing with Daniel 11 is the last what is it, 36 through 45. Those are the verses that we know that are the end time verses, the last verses there in Daniel 11. And the problem is that we don't know really who it's being spoken of. So there's kind of a contention there. And there's three main schools of thought. Okay, so when we look at Daniel, I'm just going to deal with 39 through 45. We know that 36, 7, 8, and 9. We know that those are about the Antichrist. Okay, so we know this part here, the top 39, is about the Antichrist. But the argument or the debate really is who the rest, the orange here, is being talked about. And so many people have different ideas or theories on who is being spoken of. So we're going to try and figure this out here. Okay. So the three schools of thought. The first school and the least popular is just a continuation of Antiochus Epiphanes' story. But we know for a fact it cannot be. That cannot be because, for one, it tells us that it is an end time prophecy when it talks about that he'll be successful till the indignation is complete. So we know that it's an end time prophecy. And Antiochus Epiphanes ends up dying in the land of what we now know as Iran from sickness. And the guy in Daniel actually dies in the mountains of Israel. So it cannot be Antiochus Epiphanes. So I'm just going to discount him right away. So it's either going to be talking about the king of the north, who I believe is Gog of Magog, the Assyrian, or it's going to be talking about the Antichrist, one of the two. And the main school of thought here is that it's talking about the Antichrist. But again, I think that this is a misconception or a deception on the church. So let's do a quick comparison between those verses in Daniel, the end of Daniel 11:40 through 45, and Ezekiel 38:39. And we're just going to do a really quick comparison. So both of them have a king of the north, okay, and of course in Ezekiel we know that's Gog and probably Russia. Both of them have a king in the south, and in Ezekiel that is Iran, or it says Persia because it's the old name for it. I believe that these are the same. Both of these kings invade Israel. We know that both of these are end time prophecies, okay. Both of these guys have Libya and Ethiopia, or they're connected to Libya and Ethiopia as allies, which, what a couple of odd countries if you think about that. And they both die in the mountains of Israel. So we either have two end time kings of the north that do the exact same things. We have two end time kings of the south that have a northern ally and do the exact same things. They both invade Israel. They both have Libya and Ethiopia as allies. They both die in the mountains of Israel. Or we're just talking about the same person, and we are talking about the same person. And again, I want to make out that point that we know that the Antichrist lives until the end of the 7-year tribulation, and he's captured alive at the Battle of Armageddon. Okay, so now we're going to push this even further, and this is where I think the deception comes in. Or like I said, misconception or deception. I'm not sure, but so again, this must be talking about the king of the north. But I'm going to push this a little bit further. So let's read through this just really quickly. I'm going to read through Daniel, and if this is the king of the north, okay, think of this in real time, because this may just blow you guys away here. Thus shall he. So we're going to look at this, and this is going to be, the orange is talking about the Antichrist, okay, and the rest after the second hymn will be talking about the king of the north, okay. So thus shall he do in the most strongholds of the strange God, and he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. He shall cause them to rule over many, and he shall divide the land for gain. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. There is a possibility that this actually has happened. If you think about this in real time, when the king of the south, Iran, and the king of the north, Russia, entered into Syria, who was it that they pushed against? I hope you guys know. If you guys are serious prophecy buffs, hopefully you know who it is that he pushed against. Okay, they were pushing against American interests. Simple as that. I'm going to leave it at that and let you guys come to your own conclusions. But there's a chance, and I want you to think about this, because when he came into Syria, he did come in. He came in so fast. He came in like a whirlwind, right? He was just boom. He was there. He literally pushed everyone out of the way. And do you really see much of a war here? It just says that they pushed against him, and then you see the king of the north goes on his own conquest, and you don't see the Antichrist mentioned again. And so right now, if this is the case, this might be countries with that little arrow. That might be where we're at in the timeline of these events, and we're waiting for him to overflow and pass over. So jump ahead to verse 41. He shall enter also. Oops, I messed up here. Overflow and pass over. So waiting for him to overflow and pass over. Verse 41, he shall enter also into the glorious land. Also into the glorious land. Okay, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, Edom, Moab, and the children of Ammon, which is Jordan. And he shall stretch forth his hand upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. So all those verses just prior that I showed where he's going to go down to Egypt, this is the same thing. But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. So if you go back to Daniel 8 and to the second beast, the bear with the 3 ribs in his mouth, I believe that these are the 3 ribs in his mouth: Egypt, the Libyans, and the Ethiopians. And they say, "Arise, devour much flesh." And at that point, for whatever reason, it sounds to me like he agrees with them, and they join forces and end up going north, where everyone joins in the battle. Turkey, the Libyans, and the Ethiopians, and which the Ethiopians are probably undoubtedly Sudan, because the borders have changed since then, and there's prophecy that actually speaks of that land, the river that runs through it, or the river that divides it. But Turkey, Iran, Ethiopia, and the Libyans will all join him in Israel for the battle of Gog Magog, and then tidings out of the east, out of the west, of the north come in, shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go forth with great fury to destroy and utterly take away many. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So again, there's a chance that this actually may be happening right now, and we're waiting for the second part, or the last part after the comma in verse 40 there. We're waiting for him to overflow and pass over, but we'll see. So moving forward here, the last verse here. So now we're going to move into Daniel 12, and we're going to look at the very last verse here in Daniel 11 that we just looked at, verse 45. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So the king of the north dies. Gog Magog is over. God intervened, and it's over. It's done. Okay. Then, and we go into Daniel 12, and this is a continuation. There should be no chapter break here. This is a continuation. So the king of the north dies. Gog Magog, the Assyrian, he dies, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. Now that is interesting, because we know from, if you keep reading in Daniel 12, we also know from Matthew 24, Jesus says the same thing, that this is the abomination of desolation. This is the mid-tribulation right here. So Gog dies, that war ends, then we're at mid-tribulation, and Michael stands up for his people. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. And many of them shall sleep in the dust of the earth, shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. So to me, when I look at this, the rapture cannot take place until after the Gog-Magog war. And it seems very, very, very strong that the rapture happens somewhere around the mid-tribulation part, if not just right after it. And so there you have it. I've always been a pre-tribulation guy, and I could really get into this so much further, but I've just been convinced it's going to be a mid-trib rapture, sometime just after mid-trib. You can disagree if you want, but changing Daniel, these verses in Daniel 11 to the Assyrian and to Gog Magog changes everything. It changes the way that you can interpret this verse. He dies, and at that time, Michael stands up. At that time, it's the mid-tribulation. There's a time of trouble that will never, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time, and at that time the people will be delivered. I don't know how you get around that. And the thing I've realized more and more is that, like I said, I've been a pre-tribulation. I still hope for pre-tribulation, but rapture. But when you talk to these guys, it's almost like you're talking to like a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness, where you can sit there and show them in black and white the truth and back them into a corner, and they still will not believe you. And in that verse, was it 2 Thessalonians, where it says, "Don't let any man deceive you, for the falling away must come first, and the man of sin must be revealed." And I just think it's so funny that it's that verse that they choose to change, right? Because right before it says, "Don't let any man deceive you," and then they try to deceive us with that verse by changing the way that they what they think that means, and by saying that it was a mistranslation. But if you look at that verse closely, their translation of it cannot make any sense, because it says that, it says, and I should have posted this in this video, but it says in the verse prior, 2 verses prior, that day cannot come unless that day comes. That's what they're changing it to, right? So the departure can't come unless the departure comes and the man of sin be revealed. So I hope that probably doesn't make sense to you. So go read that. I believe it's 2 Thessalonians, like chapter 4 or something like, or yeah, 2 Thessalonians chapter 4. But it says that day can't come unless that day comes. And so it doesn't make no sense with the way that is interpreted. Anyways, moving forward, that's not my whole point of this video. The point of this video was to make a correction on who the Assyrian is, and hopefully give us more light on what's going to happen very, very soon, because I believe we're actually right here at the doors. We're right here. So, and then this is just my very last bit of kind of backing scripture, Ezekiel 30. For the day is near, even the day of the Lord is near. A cloudy day, it shall be the time of the heathen, and the sword shall come upon Egypt, and great pain shall be in Ethiopia, when the slain shall fall in Egypt, and they shall take away her multitude, and her foundations shall be broken down, Ethiopia and Libya and Lydia, and all the mingled people, and Chub, and the men there, and the men of the land that is in league shall fall with them by the sword. Thus saith the Lord, they also that uphold Egypt shall fall. And then just going down here, he's going to make the countries desolate, and they shall know that I am the Lord, when I have set a fire in Egypt, and when all her helpers shall be destroyed. So again, you see this it all fits together. This verse kind of links everything together, or these passages kind of link everything together. So it sounds like he's going to go down, and I don't know what's going to happen between Russia and Egypt, but it sounds like Egypt's going to have allies. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be some kind of Psalm 83 scenario. Even I don't think I believe in the Psalm 83 scenario, but they're going to have allies. It sounds like Sudan or Ethiopia and Libya are going to help them, and at that point, Gog is going to start to come against Ethiopia and Libya, or he'll be right at their steps, and somehow they'll convince him to go up against Israel, and that's that. They'll join forces. And so that's it. Gog the Assyrian. Thank you for watching. God bless. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Am I wrong? Am I right? Go ahead and leave comments below. Thanks again.